page 19 on pre-qualification and registration of suppliers.
Yes.
Now, we spoke about pre-qualification and registration of suppliers. But then again, if you look at page 19, you are saying that the procurement organization, that is Mansakongo Area Council, they do not carry out pre-qualification procedure to determine who is qualified in relation to approving contracts. Is that the case?
Yes.
And again, the registration of suppliers, we had discussed in depth regarding the fact that you can only award contracts to suppliers that are registered with GPPA.
Right.
Because then you would have already paid all the necessary taxes that you're supposed to pay and be guaranteed. We have a list here with respect to suppliers that were awarded contracts by Mansakongo Area Council through page 20. The first being on the list, do you see it?
Yes, yes.
Kebaba. The description is tractors, tires. 1,500. You have Dabo Kunda, house rental, sewage draining, 13,800. Mansour Seka, enterprise, spare part, area council. What do you mean when you say the ones that are submitted to you? Is this not the post review upon visiting the these institutions, when your report will suggest that out of the 489 transactions, only 6 suppliers did not register with GPPA?
Yes.
Now, you and I spoke about the fact that there will probably be a list of these 489 transactions, which would possibly be awarded to various contractors.
Exactly, yes.
Now, is there a way that you can know, because it doesn't indicate whether you sampled this in conducting the review, whether you adopted the sampling procedure or not?
Actually, it's not indicated, but I want to believe that the list can be more than this, because the council also award a lot of contracts to fuel dealers, but you have a lot of fuel dealers in the land that are not registered with the GPPA, but we can verify.
Yes.
We can verify.
Yes. So we want to know whether the list for 2022. Now we know it is not exhaustive.
Yes.
Based on your answer in relation to the fuel dealers.
Exactly.
In fact, in the prevailing years, you see that apparently, in fact, the list is much more bigger than this.
Yes.
Yes. So please help us with the exhaustive list in relation to the amount of, or the number of suppliers that we have contracted, and how many of them did not register with GPPA.
Okay.
Yeah, so the effect of non-registration, I think we have already exhaustively talked about the fact that it causes financial loss to the country.
Right.
And then there could be biasness in the identification of prospective suppliers.
Yes.
Do they, when you raise these issues, do they normally give any reasons as to why they choose to go with suppliers who have not registered with GPA?
Actually, some of their responses would be the nature of their transactions, their environment, basically the nature and their environment, because in most cases what they claim is like the area that they are, there are a lot of suppliers that of course find it very difficult to register with the authority.
But then their
some
obligation,
of them, according to them, will be small petty traders that may find it very not profitable some of them may claim that it is not profitable for them to register with, given the size and the volume of their businesses.
My point is, it is not for the area councils or any public institution to even urge any business person, man or woman or entity to register with GPPA. That is not for the public office to do. That is for any individual or group of individuals or company that want to engage into business and want to have some contracts from public offices. It is your responsibility to register with GPPA, is it not? And not necessarily the institutions telling them you go and register, and we are urging you. If you look at the reply, the response on page 21, they are saying, although Masoko Area Council gives out contracts at times to only registered suppliers, however, Council will make it its most best to sensitize the suppliers to register with GPA and to create awareness that public funds should not be spent on an unregistered company. I am saying that you are not even supposed to create this awareness. This may even affect your independence. When you are urging a particular supplier to register, you're talking to them and encouraging them to register. It means you already have a preconceived mind that they may be awarded contracts.
Council, I think you are right, because no justification can legalize the award of contract without registering with the authority. And the onus lies on the procuring organization to ensure that whoever is being awarded a public contract
is already
registered with the authority before.
Now, on point 11 on the same page, page 21, the findings with regards to specifications. It states, if I read verbatim, that during review of the procurement proceedings, we observed that some transactions had technical specifications that were in accordance with GPPA sections 225, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, I am not sure whether
this citation
is correct. But however, technical specifications were not generated in most of the requests for quotation and single source procurement spare parts, building materials, and borehole construction. And there were no procurement documentations for the construction, such as there was no Form 012 and Form 041, and no contract committee minutes. Now you have a table of contracts awarded without specifications. You have supplier SB Electrical, borehole drilling is what they were being contracted for. The amount is $675,000. You have Jabi JJ Jarka, borehole drilling, $750,000. You have MKD car battery, $4,000. Modu Today Enterprise spare parts, $14,575. Now, when they just list what the contractor is being contracted for, when you go to conduct these reviews, for example, number 4, spare parts, are you giving any evidence as to what type of spare parts these are? Whether it is, let's say, a gearbox that they have to procure, or so on and so forth?
I guess it's spare parts for vehicles. But as you rightly said, it's not specific as to what kind of spare parts. But whatever the case may be, there are no specifications for whatever they intended to buy.
So if they procured head, like the bulb itself alone, it may be way less than this amount. You wouldn't know.
Yes.
And do you by any chance know as to why you have the difference in, I know it is different suppliers, but then the drilling of the borehole, I think it's already in the specific findings, but let's just discuss it briefly. Number 1, you have a contract awarded at an amount of $765,000 to one SB Electrical. But then another borehole was allegedly drilled for a different amount, significantly different, $750,000. Were there any explanation as to why there is this difference?
The specification could have explained better, but then borehole drilling, again, you can have boreholes of the same specification, but then the amount may differ based on the water table at different places, because boreholes will be dug at different places. But in most cases, I'm not trying to defend them that is the exact, but then boreholes can have different depth,
naturally,
and charges will be based on the depth of the borehole.
Okay, so
based
now
on the water table.
Let's just go to chapter 4 briefly on page 27, where they have these boreholes being specifically mentioned.
Page 20.
27 is chapter 4. But if you go to page 29, you have the first borehole, the procurement of borehole drilling in Tabayel village. Tabayel village. Now the category is service, amount is $650,000. About that contract to SB Electrical, method used, request for quotation. Now, I did not see any compliance issues, but what you see is non-compliance, that there was no minute of the contracts committee to approve the procurement, that there was no delivery receipt to show that the procurement was completed as stipulated, and there was no inspection committee to inspect the work being done. So what comes to your mind when you see this?
Now, if a contract is awarded where you cannot find minutes of the contracts committee agreeing to whatever course of action they intend to do, it may suggest that the contract is, or the decision to award is taken by one individual without involving the others.
Yes.
Which, of course, is a non-compliant issue, because procurements are meant to be free, fair, and should be agreed upon by a contracts committee. They should be planned for, and so on. So not one individual should take responsibility to award or approved an award of a contract.
So here you have a situation where there are three main issues that are fundamentally wrong or grossly inappropriate in relation to this particular contract, which amounts to $650,000. Yes. Number one, it is not even been approved generally by the contracts committee. So it can be the decision of an individual or group of individuals, but you cannot find, in fact not cannot find, there does not exist evidence that this particular procurement was being approved. So then you cannot justify as to why $650,000 was allegedly spent on the drilling of borehole.
Right.
Now the second one is, in fact, that raises the question as to whether in fact the borehole was ever drilled, whether monies were spent where they said they will spend the money on, which is, you said there was no delivery receipt to show that the procurement was completed as stipulated.
Right, because when according to our laws, when a contract is satisfactorily executed, there is a form called 041, which should be completed to indicate that the work is done satisfactorily, or if payment is effected, obviously there should be a receipt to indicate that, of course, something is done and the payment is effected. But then, not to wait for other observations, probably from the commissioners, but then the question would be, have you verified to see whether it is done or not? And in this case, sometimes we depend on the 041 and so on, and based on our capacity as an authority, sometimes we go out to verify, but in most cases we don't verify.
Now, the other borehole will be on...
If I may get you correctly, you said sometimes you go to verify, but you don't go on the ground to really do the actual verification.
No, what I am saying is, sometimes when we go out for review, we will depend entirely on the submissions or the documents given to us for review. And but then it's mandatory that every institution, after successful implementation of any procurement, you should complete Form 041. That is supplier assessment, a form which is completed at the end of the procurement to show that the contract is satisfactorily done. So sometimes we depend entirely on the form, on that form. But again, we've seen along the discussions and the like, and even at our own end, we know that when contracts are approved, it is obligatory that we also go out to verify and see exactly what the level of implementation and so on and so forth.
Okay, just to come back to the table that is showing this these contracts for construction or the drilling of boreholes. During the course of the review, was there any market survey to have a comparison as to whether these prices are actually genuine? Because you know, you have told us the importance of market survey. It will give you an idea of what is obtainable in the market, and I believe that that is also applicable here. Given the location, given the area, you will be able to assess, you know, if there are some similar projects done, similar activities done like drilling, you will be able to assess what is the reasonable, you understand, analysis that could be inferred from those activities. So my question is, during the course of this review, did you see anywhere that market survey was done to ascertain that these amounts that are stipulated are correct amounts?
No, we have not seen any document relative to that.
All right, thank you.
Yes, so in comparison, you will see page 28, the construction of borehole for Jatakunda community.
Yes.
The amount is $750,000. Now, for the compliance findings, the procurement documentation as received, GPPA form 100 was attached. The request was sent to the authority for approval. Quotations were collected. Now, for non-compliance, there was no minutes of the contracts committee to approve the procurement. There was no procurement documentation, such as GPA form 041, 102, 101, and 1012. There were no detailed specifications in form 101. Now, when you said under findings on compliance, that request was sent to the authority for approval. Which authority are you referring to?
GPPA.
Now, was this approved?
I think sure it was approved. It should be approved.
On what basis would it be approved when there were no minutes of the contracts committee to approve the procurement? Is that a possibility that GPA can approve certain procurement when the contracts committee did not even approve it?
It should not be approved anyway, without the minutes of the contracts committee. It should not have been approved.
Can you report to us on a definitive position, maybe by tomorrow, whether this particular compliance was approved by GPA?
Okay.
The same with the borehole drilling in Tabayal village, the $650,000.
Yeah, yes, Council, before we discuss that one.
Yes?
Yes. Mr. Sanyang?
Yes.
Is it possible to grant approval to a PO without them having to to comply with the requisite documentation, such as filling the forms correctly. Example form 041, 102, 101 and 012. Can you give approval without all this being completed?
Now, a form like 041 is supplier assessment.
What I'm saying.
Coming step by step by the forms. I'm trying to take you through the forms.
Okay.
Now, 041 is supplier assessment. And in this case, I want to believe that it's wrong citation, because if the supplier is yet to do the work, how do you assess? Only if, for example, you want to make reference to a past thing, or if they want to justify based on something that they have done, something of similar nature that they have done, then Form 1041 will be required in that case. Now,
is it provided for by law?
If, for example, you want a single source and you indicate that I want a single source simply because this supplier have done X, Y, and Z for me, you must ask, or you must provide evidences that similar works were done and that were satisfactory. In that case, yes, it is mandatory. But if it is a new contract that is going to be awarded, there may not be necessary. It may not be necessary to make reference, because.
But Mr. Sanya, you've told this commission. You told this commission in your previous testimony that for you to single source, there are certain criteria, set down criteria, that you must fulfill.
Yeah.
And at no point did I hear you say that you must bring in similar executed contracts to allow you to single source. So how does it come in now? Because you know, we've gone through the issue of single sourcing and why, you understand, the law provides for it, and what are the requirements. So how now would you now reconcile these two?
When I mentioned about the conditions for the use of single source,
yes,
I mentioned about compatibility as one of them, compatibility. There is also a section that says that if a contract of similar nature was done.
Can you refer us? Can you refer us to the law?
Can we move on to these conditions for the use of single source?
Yes, refer us to the law, please.
Section 44. Section 44
of the Act.
Of the Act 2014. Conditions for the use of single source procurement. You've seen that?
Yes.
The single source procurement method may be used only in the following circumstances. 1, or A, where the estimate.
Can you refer again to the section? What section?
Section 44.
44, okay.
Conditions for the use of single source procurement.
Okay. Yes.
The single source procurement method may be used only in the following circumstances. A, where the estimated value of the procurement does not exceed the amount set in the regulation. 2, or B, where only one supplier has the technical capacity or capability or capacity to fulfill the procurement requirement, or the exclusive rights to manufacture the goods, carry out the works, or perform the services to be procured, and no suitable alternative exists. C, where there is an emergency, but that does not affect what we are asking for. D, where the procuring organization, having procured works, consultancy services, or services from a supplier, determines that additional goods, works, or services must be procured from the same source for reasons of standardization or because of the need for compatibility with existing goods, equipment, technology, works, or services, taking into account the effectiveness of the original procurement. So here, the effective, a contract was given before. The supplier or contractor executed. You are happy. And you want to add additional work, or you have a similar contract. And because of the nature, probably the volume, the size, and so on, you want a single source because of the effectiveness of the original contract. Where is that evidence now to show that that original contract that you are talking about was satisfactorily done? There must be evidences. So this is the time when, of course, you will request for Form 041, supplier assessment, to assess the level of performance of the original contract. So, yes, it is true, we've never, or I have never mentioned about the Form 041, but then this is the importance of the 041, to assess how this supplier, the supplier that you wanted to give extra work, performed in the previous one.
So what does sub 2 provide?
Pardon?
What does sub 2?
Sub 2.
Yes.
The 44. Limited size of the proposed procurement.
No. Sub 2 of 44.
2.
Sub 2 of 44.
Yes. A single source procurement on the grounds referred to in subsection 1B, C, and D shall be subjected to approval by the authority.
You are reading D, right?
In 1B,
yes, you were reading D, right?
C and D.
Yes.
And D.
Yes.
Shall be subject to approval by the authority, which shall act on requests for approval without delay. So in such cases, you want to do additional work or whatsoever.
So it means that even whereas you use that Form 041,
yes,
it's not automatic by you, the PO. It has to be subject to your approval. That is the authority's approval.
Yes. In fact, the 041 that we are talking about is a justification to the authority. You are trying to justify to the authority why you can use single source.
All right. Yes.
Yes. Now, please provide the approval that I requested for in relation to the construction of the borehole at Jatakunda on page 28.
Yes.
And the one at Tabayel village on page 29.
Okay.
Yes, Council. Can you help us understand what the management response is? Because it says, as for this transaction, Form 101 and 102 were attached and minutes were generated for it.
Yes, please explain.
Okay, now this was a query that it's a query from the GPPA, but there is a space for management to respond to our query. So according to them, if you look at the non-compliance, we said these documents were not submitted. So they are countering that. They are arguing that they have submitted these documents. So what we should have done is we should have made further efforts to verify whether these things were submitted or not.
So in other words here, you are not sure whether the authority confirmed that these forms were attached?
Yes.
So can you please check for us?
Okay.
Thank you. And provide it to the Commission?
Okay.
Yes, Council.
Yes. Now, turn to page 25. With respect to value for money, this probably will be important in relation to the chairperson's concerns regarding market surveys.
Page 25.
Yes.
Okay.
What are your findings on page 25?
Now, the procuring organization does not undertake market survey and analysis of suppliers and prices in the market during the year being reviewed to inform the placing of order as required by regulations. The PO does not negotiate to get better offers as recommended by regulations for single source procurement.
So I think this clearly shows that for the year 2022, there were no market surveys. Is that correct?
For this particular procurement, yes. I am not sure of others. But
for this particular year?
Yes, for this particular specific procurement.
Which one is that?
And
no, I mean, page 25, point 21, did not specifically mention any particular procurement. It is a general finding. Because once you have your procurement plan, are you following?
Yes,
are you
I am
with me?
following. I'm following.
Yes, I am trying to make a point here, and then please don't hesitate to correct me. Once you have your procurement plan, you know generally that this is the procurement plan for 2022.
Right.
We will probably want to procure X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
Unless and until there is probably an emergency or an additional this thing to the procurement plan, but that sticks. And so you conduct your market surveys with respect to the procurement plan. Is that not the case?
Right.
So the procurement, the market survey is not with respect to any individual or any specific procurement, but it's a general market survey in relation to the procurement plan. Is that not supposed to be the case?
Right. As far as this finding is concerned, on the value for money 21, yes.
Yes, it is a general finding.
It's generalized.
So that it affects all the procurements that you have listed in the year 2022.
Right.
Yes. So, but now to be more specific, this now tells us that even in the procurement of borehole drilling in Tabayel village and also Jatakunda, wherein $650,000 and $750 was spent respectively, they did not bother themselves as to what is the prevailing market price. If you want to do a borehole of a certain specification, even though we know there is no specification that exists in all this procurement, so we don't even know the size of the borehole. In short, there was no specification to inform us better as to whether there was value for money. But again, there was no, they didn't even bother themselves in relation to knowing the market price for the digging of a borehole or drilling of a borehole in a particular place.
Right.
So, Madam Chairperson, I think this answers your concerns regarding market surveys.
Thank you, Council.
Yes, and
sorry, Council.
Yes.
Let me just ask a question. How long does your people spend in any area council if they go on this their procurement review? How many days, or is it a day or two or a week or 2 weeks? How long do they spend in an area council?
Now, the duration will depend on the volume of transactions that an institution takes, but on the average, it's between 1 week to 2 weeks. 1 to 2 weeks.
Now that leads me to my second question. You spoke as general as possible. At times you do based on the form 041 to ascertain whether a certain procurement has been done, and at times you do visit to ascertain whether this was done or not. Within that week, is it not possible, because I assume here that they will be given a vehicle to go and do their trekking.
Yes.
Why couldn't they find time for things like this, to make it their duty to go and verify? Drive to the villages and see whether this borehole has been dug, it's pumping water. Because from the report, it's not saying whether the borehole is functioning. They could just say, we dug a borehole, and that's it. But are the communities that were the ones, the beneficiaries, are they benefiting? I think these are some of the extra mile your post or whatever, when they are doing, should at least complete the thing, not to leave it hanging. Because for me, I don't know, is it Jatapa or Jatakunda or whatever, whether that borehole, one, was dug, two, whether it is functional or not.
Commissioner, I think you are right, and it's a good observation. Now, if all works well, if you could remember, we said the procurement request is the responsibility of the user department, the user who is directly affected. Now, the user have identified something. Then, of course, this becomes part of the procurement plan. Then you have all other protocols observed and followed. For example, complete documentation, which should be attested to by other responsible people, including the contracts committee members and so on and so forth. You have members of the contracts committee declaring that they don't have any, of course, interest or whatsoever by completing Form 012, declaration by members of the contracts committee. The request is made and approval, all necessary signatures appended. Now, you have Form 041, sorry, Form 101 in the case of request for quotation, or a bidding document in the case of open and restricted tenders. These are all bidding documents, 101 or a bidding document. And there is a section where you have to clearly define your requirements, clearly define. And the user body should be part of the user department. The guys who are directly affected should be part of designing the specifications or requirements. Now, this is floated, and the suppliers or contractors respond based on the requirements. They respond. You have the user department, who should also be part of the receipt, because at the end of the day, there should be a committee to evaluate, to ensure that responses are based on what you said you wanted. So evaluation, the guy who is more responsive to your requirements is the one who is awarded the contract. Now the contract is awarded. Supplies are supplied, or if it is a construction, the construction takes effect. At the end of the day, you have another body to go and inspect and accept, including the person who is directly affected, who drew the specifications and the like. These people received and confirmed receipt and inspect if things are to work according to what the law requires. Now inspected and of course verified, and receipts are given, acceptance is done, and at the end of the day, of course, they completed, or they complete Form 041 to show that the contract is satisfactorily done.
Yes, sorry to intervene at this point. I believe that at some point the commissioners are getting lost because we are not following exactly your explanation. But based on what you are saying, where does the Act situate management supply responsibility?
Management?
Supply responsibility.
Now, is the responsibility of the contract committee.
Just for the understanding of everybody, what is responsibility for supply management? So that we put it in context.
Supply management is to ensure that the supplies are done according to, as prescribed in Form 101, in terms of timeliness, in terms of quality, in terms of quantity, and so on and so forth.
Now here what we are talking about, responsibility for supply management. Who are the people that are identified in the Act that should be responsible and or liable in the event that...
Contracts committee.
Is it?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Can you refer us to the law?
Well, if you look at the functions of the Contracts Committee, page 49.
49 of the Act?
Yes.
Yes, go on.
The functions of a Contracts Committee shall include A, verification of proper procurement planning and availability of funds. B, approval of the invitation to bid and the bidding document. C, approval of the use of single source procurement in accordance with the regulations.
I don't think you are getting me, Mr. Sanya. What I am asking is the responsibility for supply management, which is totally different from what you are reading to us. Because the Act situates who are the people that are responsible and what is going to be the consequence if... can you turn to the Act?
Yes.
Section 37.
Section 37.
Yes. Can you read sub 1, A and B?
Responsibility of supply management.
4. It's not of. It's 4.
Responsibility for supply management.
Yes.
1. A permanent secretary or head of a procuring organization and the members of the Contracts Committee shall be A, personally responsible for any lapses in the general supervision and control of stores and stores accounts in the procuring organization and ensure that the members of the store keeping staff perform their duties satisfactorily.
And B?
B, liable for any financial loss incurred through failure to meet these responsibilities, or those
responsibilities.
Yes.
Yes.
So your question was who are responsible, and
yes.
I said the Contracts Committee.
Yes. So you said the Contracts Committee
yes.
alone. So you can see that in Section 37, it is just not the Contracts Committee alone that is responsible, right? Did you see that? It is saying the permanent secretary or head of a procuring organization and the members of the Contracts Committee.
Now, when you talk about a permanent secretary, it's taking the ministries as an example. And here, in the ministries, the permanent secretary is head of the procuring organization and the head of the Contracts Committee. That is why the permanent secretary is mentioned there, because it's taken to be a procuring organization.
Yes, that is what I'm saying. You said it was just the Contracts Committee. So I am saying that it is just not the Contracts Committee alone, because that is why it is listed, it is provided for, and specifically they identified those people that will be responsible Is that not it?
I want to find it difficult for to understand what you mean by, because here, if you look at one, it's referring to the permanent secretary. Under here, the permanent secretary is mentioned because in the cases of ministries, the permanent secretary is the head of the procuring organization. And in this case, is the chairman of the contracts committee. In the ministries, the chairman of contracts committees are the permanent secretaries, being the heads of these institutions. And the head, if I may read again, permanent secretary or head. So you have the permanent secretaries in the ministries, and you have other heads of institutions in parastatals like DPPA and others, where you have directors, managing directors, and the like.
Well, I'm finding it difficult to understand your explanation as to what the provision of the law is saying. But my understanding is that for the issue of responsibility for supply management, they are saying that the permanent secretary, like in the ministries, is the chair of the contracts committee. But not necessarily, because in some institutions, it is not the permanent secretary that is the chair of the contracts committee. Is that not correct? There are
the law provides that even where the permanent secretary delegates responsibility, whoever is taking that responsibility does it on behalf of the permanent secretary.
Yes. Yes, so now my take is that the permanent secretary, or, which means is either the permanent secretary or the head of the procuring organization and the contracts committee.
And who are these members of the contracts committee?
In different institutions, different people are set out to be in the contracts committee. Is that not the case?
Yes.
So that is my take.
Okay.
So, Council, can you proceed, please? We will take your explanation.
Now, please turn to page 27 with respect to the specific findings.
Just a minute,
Are you there?
Page 27.
27.
Yes.
Now, to start with, you have about I think about 3 or 4 findings under chapter 4. Do you see it? Mine stops at page 28. Or, yes, to 29.
Is it on page 28 or 29?
I said from page 27,
okay,
chapter 4, you will see that the specific findings, these are the samples of the cases under review for the year 2022.
Yes.
You know you have 2 sets of findings. One is a general finding and the second is a specific finding. Is that not correct?
Yeah.
So I am saying you have about 6 examples of case analysis that you guys have done.
Yes, yes.
Now, if you turn to page 8.
Page 8.
Yes, on the data analysis.
Yes.
You are saying that you have the general findings that have been examined in totality.
Yes.
The performance of the procurement and disposal functions and the adequacy of the procurement and disposal records. And then you have the specific findings on the reviewed cases,
yes,
examined whether their processing was in accordance with the requirements of the Act and the regulation.
Yes.
Now, my point is, on the specific findings, you should have the reviewed cases for a particular year. And in this year, 2022, you only have 6 out of 489 cases. Can you explain as to why that is the case?
Actually, for the specific findings, in most cases, we just identify, we pick at random because there are so many that it may be difficult to go over all of them one by one.
Yes.
So what we normally do is we identify samples. We take samples of single sources that are specific in terms of their nature and so on, and we take some data from the request for quotation and so on. So in most cases we select.
Now, what are the chances of cover-up? I'm asking, trying to picture the fact that when you have a team, you send a team to maybe conduct procurement review for a particular year. Let's say, in this instance, in Mansakok Area Council, you as a director, you may not be present. Yes. I believe in most cases you are not present. What are the chances that cover-ups may be limited, the risk may be minimal, in a situation wherein you have 489 transactions being done in a particular institution, but you only have 6 samples being presented to you as a director or as an institution by the team you send in a particular area? How do you fact-check the team that you send? How do you conduct your supervisory role to make sure that they did actually conduct their functions diligently, without fear or favor, or without trying to play hide and seek, trying to cover up for any personal gains?
Actually, the lower the number, the more chances of error that you may have. But then, if you look at the other parts of the report, generally, almost all of them are covered in terms of, probably for this other report, but then in most cases in our write-up, apart from the specific findings, we look at all issues including registration, all issues including single sources that are above the threshold did not follow the right procedures, RFQs and everything. So at the end of everything, we select or identify a few of them to look at them in detail. But then in the other write-up, at the beginning of every report, covers all the transactions.
At the beginning of every report? The report you are referring to is different from the review?
Because at the end of the day, for all the reports that we dealt with.
May I understand?
The
report you are referring to, is it different from this review that we are currently discussing?
No, what I am saying is, generally,
yes,
in our reportings, we will indicate all those procurements that are given to suppliers that are not registered with the authority.
Yes.
All of them. We report on single sources that are single source, either they are above the single source threshold, or they do not follow the due process. RFQ, the same thing. So at the end of everything, we also identify certain specific transactions to deal with them thoroughly.
And those are the ones that...
does not mean that we have not looked at them in the various exercises.
Now, first you have, it appears as if, from what I'm understanding, there are 2 parts of the review process.
Exactly.
So this will probably be the final part.
And sorry, yeah, even if you look at our write-up, the report will report on 2 findings, specific and general.
Yes.
And the general findings will deal with everything. We look at everything and report generally.
Yes.
But then the other part will be specific, where we identify certain, the specific ones that are selected, the number may be too limited. That's a good observation. We'll take note of it. But then what I am saying is that the specific ones that we deal with doesn't mean that the others are not taken.
No, exactly. In fact, that is what I'm much more interested in. Probably to just spark up something in your management structure to see to understand how you deal with certain your oversight. Well, I'm thinking, if you are a director, you no longer go in the fields, do you?
No.
Or maybe occasionally.
Yeah.
So my point is, the people you send, the team you send to these institutions, you must be able to exercise a degree of control, even remotely, when you have certain things, certain mechanisms in place to make sure no matter what they do, you will limit their degree of discretion to actually probably tamper with certain pieces of evidence or take certain individual decisions without subjecting that to management. Do you have mechanisms as to how you can find that out? No, well, you didn't report on XYZ. There were transactions done in this situation, but you haven't reported on XYZ. So, for example, if I am to, or anyone is to offer bribe to any member of your team or a head of your team that you have sent in a particular institution, and they decide to omit certain facts, maybe there were procurements, but 5 or 6 procurements done, and they didn't follow due process. The amount is about, it's a lot of money, millions, in the millions, and they decide not to report that. How are you going to know that?
Well, sorry. I think I want to confirm that your observation is valid, yes. But then, if, for example, you select, and not only GPPA, but even auditors, sometimes they go over, or they don't go over all the documents.
Yes.
They select. So in such selections, there is a possibility that even if you select all and leave one, it's possible that the one that you left out is even more serious than the ones that have been selected.
When the auditor goes to do random auditing, for example, maybe you have so many transactions. Of course, we know, we have been informed that it's either you do you audit entirely, depending on the quantity of the work. For example, if you go to Basa Ida Council, there were instances where the compliance review were conducted on all the transactions being done. Probably maybe it was not much for a particular year. But if you have, for example, compliance, if you have procurement transactions, let's say 700, 800 in a year, maybe you don't have the resources to conduct review on all of those. So therefore, you do the procedure, you are allowed to do sampling, right? Exactly. I am not talking about that. Now, if you're doing sampling, for example, and you sampled, let's say, 100 out of 700 transactions, it means you must have adequate information about that 100. And that may give you the general overview. If they are not in compliance with procedure, then you will safely conclude that this is the situation that you find. In most instances, they are not in compliance with so many things. But I am saying now, even with that 100, it appears as if you don't even have the required information, because they are informed that there are 789 transactions. It means 489 transactions, I beg your pardon, 483 for single sourcing and 6 for request for quotation, which means they either examine this, all this procurement, or they were just giving the figures at random, but then probably some of them, they had documentation. My point is, if you look at your data analysis, when you stated that specific findings on the reviewed cases examined whether their processing was in accordance with the requirements of the Act, if you turn to the specific findings, you only have 6 cases out of 489. The number doesn't make sense to me. Okay. I'm just trying to bring something to the attention of the commissioners to tell you that what you have in relation to the number of procurement activities for a particular year and the number that you are putting in your report is not really a fair comparison. In fact, it's not even close. So if I only have to deal with 6 procurement activities for Masakongo Area Council, the commissioners may not even have a better understanding of the procurement activity for the year 2022. I don't know whether the honorable commissioners are following. Yes. So again,
Yes. Just to buttress on what you are saying, can you please refer to page 23? You could see that at paragraph 17, there is findings that 23.
23.
Page 23.
3.
Okay.
You could see that there is some findings made, and you cannot relate this finding to any activity in the report. So, in other words, Council is trying to put across to you that there are issues with the report. Because if, for instance, and this is an occurrence in most of the reports that we have seen, you will make reference to a particular finding without even giving us the opportunity to know what activity it was about. Because this finding says, we observed that Mansa Konko Area Council has filled in the GPPA Form 102, which served as the contract document for requests for quotations procurements. But the supplier does not sign the document. Which supplier and what were the issues? Nothing in the preceding pages tells you that this is what you are referring to. So that is why we are finding it difficult to appreciate what you have in the report. Did you see that?
Yes, I think we've taken note.
Yes.
We have taken note. Maybe we'll also look at the way we operate.
Yes.
But even if I look at, if I take you back to page, for example, page 8, where we have the 2022 review covered all the 489.
Yes.
The 2022 review
Yes.
covered all the 489 transactions.
Yes.
All of them were covered. And here, what do we look at? We look at all the issues, including whether their contracts are awarded to registered suppliers, whether they use the right procurement methods, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the whole exercise, we select a few of them to deal with them, but that doesn't mean that the others were not looked at. But what we are saying is, it's a good observation, and we have taken note of it, and in our future reviews, we'll of course adjust ourselves and ensure that we covered more in detail in our specific findings.
And what we also noted is the fact that it seems the POs are opting to use more of single sourcing and RFQ, and this is being validated by the authority.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And having regard to the fact that these forms of procurement are not recipe for value for money, and the authority continues to indulge the POs to continue using single sourcing and RFQ. Is that not encouraging them to continue to flout the rules and to continue to do transactions that are not in compliance with the rules, the law, the regulations?
Actually, I think there is a clarification that I should make. Mm-hmm. It is clear in the Act that open tender is the default method. Mm-hmm. Of course, competition and the like is the more preferred method. But in these single sources even include their day-to-day activities. $10 to buy something, to change a padlock, to change a bulb, all is taken to be transactions. So all added together obviously shows that single source is more. Of course, there are other implications, but then we have to understand that even this...
Yes, but Mr. Sanyang, we understand the concept of single sourcing. And we understand that is why the Act, your Act, specifically provided for threshold.
Exactly.
You understand? And gave very clear guidelines as to when you are supposed to single source.
Yeah.
And when you do engage in single sourcing, what is it that you are supposed to follow as due process? The Act is very clear.
Exactly.
You understand? I do understand that there are so many smaller things that you will need to do. You may not end up using the more preferred form of procurement, that is open tender, to make it competitive and all that. But then you have also explained to this commission, which we have understood very well, that for works, goods and services, there is 20 and 50,000 respectively, the threshold. But we have seen consistently the POs are doing single sourcing, running over hundreds of thousands of dollars, you understand, without due regard of those thresholds. So this is where I am coming from.
Right.
Did you get it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And now, so when these reports are being written by your team,
yes.
Are you following?
Yes, I'm following.
Now, if they send it to the directors for review and probably approval, how do you conduct your verification procedures? That is, if you have any.
Now, actually, when reports are sent to the directors, we'll also go over it. We go over the reports and then make our comments or observations before finalization. But like I said earlier, they are divided into teams. They are expected to do work in teams.
Microphone, please. Yeah.
The approach is like dividing the...
Can you use the microphone? Just speak to the microphone. Yes, thank you.
The approach is like they will divide themselves into groups. And the groups will have team leaders.
Yes.
And also they will identify somebody to be in charge of report writing. So at the end of the exercise, a report will be generated, which will be reviewed by the team. Now from the team you have the other senior officials, and from senior officials it will also be sent to probably managers and then the directors for review. But at each of these stages, when observations are made, they will be written and then taken note of and before finalization.
So do you just limit yourself to the report being written by a particular team? Or do you also review the files, for example, to verify whether they are in line, whether they are accurate?
Council, remember that the files are at the field level. So the files that we review are always at field level. So if we want to verify it, it may require somebody, of course, taking a vehicle again and going back to the field. So yes, in most cases, we depend on the information that is provided.
By the team.
In case we look at it and find something doubting, we can even call them and we discuss about it.
Yes. I asked that because I am trying to see whether you have any, like I indicated earlier, any control mechanism or lay down rules or procedures that you follow as directors to effectively supervise the team that goes to conduct this compliance review. Now, just to ask you generally, how do you supervise the teams that are conducting this review and then writing reports?
Well, like I said earlier, the first thing that we do is to ensure that they work in teams. So the teams will be created, with, and in teaming them, obviously we look at their qualities, we look at their seniority and the like, and then team them. So they go out when they go out to do their work, yes, they will be reporting to us. Whatever is written will be sent to us. Sometimes what is sent to us may require some verifications. Sometimes it may require us making telephone calls to make certain verifications. But then the approach depends on the circumstances.
Do you have guidelines or policies that dictate as to how compliance reviews are supposed to be conducted, that the teams must follow and must abide by in the execution of their duties?
Actually, we don't have guidelines for. We don't have.
So you don't have guidelines. You don't have policies. So now that brings us to the issue at hand. When for example, you know, you've already agreed with me that you have 489 transactions, and only 6 are being shown to you as a director. But you agreed with me that this is significantly a very, very low number to even in any way represent an average amount.
We mean 400 and something and 6 is shown to us.
Yes.
No, that is not what I said.
Yes, can you please explain?
I said,
go ahead.
I said there are over 400 transactions.
Yes.
And all of them were looked at.
No.
All of them.
You're not getting it. These 489 transactions,
yes,
only 6 is being reported in detail. They only informed you that they reviewed 489 transactions.
Exactly.
And remember, you said these files are in the field. You don't have access to the file unless you send someone to go and request for these files and examine them personally. Is that not the case?
Yes.
So I will want to assume, unless that is not the case, that the 489 transactions which are said to be reviewed by the team, all these files are in Mansakoko Area Council.
Yes.
But then the samples that you are shown as a director, or what I mean the director, I mean all the directors in GBBA, is the 6 samples that you have been shown according to the report. That is why I said 6 samples were being shown to you out of 489. Do you understand? The first is the procurement of printing audit report books and calendars, 66,400. Do you see that?
Yes.
Which there were no minutes of contrast committee. In fact, why this is a concern is because the contrast committee in Mansakonko, just like other area councils, they don't really provide minutes of meetings. In most cases.
Yes.
They don't have, there is no inspections team, no evaluations committee, nothing. Total disregard of the rules and the regulation. If there were some degree of samples where you see that they are in compliance with the requirements, then one may logically want to believe that, in fact, they did not disclose certain transactions because maybe probably they are. This point is very bad.
It's 4 o'clock.
Yes, I'm just been informed by the technician that the mic is on, but we may rise now. As electricity is gone, NAWEC is gone, so we will reconvene tomorrow, inshallah. Thank you.